YouTubers, I need some help. I recently bought a Canon T4i, which is the entry-level DSLR for taking HD video. And the reason I bought the T4i is because I have a friend who had a T3i, and he was showing me some of the video that he had captured, and I was really impressed with how crisp the video looked, and of course was impressed with what you can achieve with lenses versus what I could achieve on my standard HD M31 Canon camcorder. So I decided to go ahead and step up from the T3i and get the T4i, which is the obviously next release of that same model, thinking that of course it would be an upgrade in a couple different ways, and it is, in terms of the touch screen and some of the different things that it can do, and you can read all about that if you want to. But what we decided to do was run a couple of tests between both models, trying to be as nerdy as possible, but nowhere near as nerdy as people that do this for a living when comparing cameras. But I wanted to kind of show you guys some of the different tests that we did as you can compare video side by side, and maybe some of you can help me explain what I'm seeing, because I'm tending to lean towards the T3i's quality as compared to the T4i. And again, I could be doing something wrong. I could have missed something deep in the bowels of the menus inside the camera, which I can definitely be educated on if you have any thoughts. But again, wanted to show you what we had captured to kind of get some perspective. So let's talk about test one that we did. Okay, so test number one. Test number one is where we actually took both cameras, put them side by side on a tripod, and filmed myself in my kitchen. Now there were plenty of light in the kitchen. It was in the morning time, had all the windows open, even had some of the lights on in the kitchen area to add some additional lighting. So put both of these cameras next to each other and put them both on the auto mode. I know you're never supposed to shoot in auto, but again, we're beginners, so we want to get familiar with the camera and learn the differences between auto and of course manual. But we really wanted to find out from the T3i to the T4i how they interpreted their surroundings. You would hope that between these two models they would be exactly the same in terms of their shutter speed and aperture and ISO. But let's see what actually happened through this. So the T3i video is on the left, T4i is on the right. The major differences are happening in aperture and ISO. The T3i was at 2.0, so you kind of have that soft background, a very artistic look, and a 200 ISO. Versus the T4i, which had to jump up its aperture to 5.6, you kind of lose that artistic look, and 1600 ISO. Unbelievable. So when we saw those results from two cameras that were practically identical, except for some of the things that we know are different between the T4i from the T3i, how they could take a situation and come up with completely different settings on their auto modes for what they're actually viewing. To have that drastic of a difference between 1600 ISO and 200 ISO, I mean, that is a huge difference in terms of the quality of what you tend to be getting in those types of videos. 1600 for that kind of light is really unnecessary and could really increase a lot of noise in your video, and it's unneeded. The aperture aspect, you know, I like the artistic selection that the T3i took on those automatic preferences. I think it looks a lot better, it's a lot more interesting, and the T4i didn't do that at all at 5.6. No idea why. Let's take a look at test 2. Alright, test 2, here we go. Took the auto settings from our previous test of the T3i and manually adjusted the T4i to those exact settings. And as you can see from these two videos, there still is a difference between these two cameras. Again, the T3i tends to have a more vibrant, brighter picture, and the T4i is muted. But again, the exact same settings. So, exact settings, still a difference in terms of the quality of the video, leaning towards the T3i, not feeling really great about my T4i purchase. So let's go ahead and look at test 3. So I guess for giggles, we decided to go to the auto settings of the T4i in the original test and put it at 60 shutter speed, 5.6 aperture, and 1600. And we manually put the T3i to match those as best as it could. It could only get to 40 on the shutter speed, not quite sure about that. But basically it's the same result as the previous test in the fact that the T3i tends to have a better picture as compared to the T4i. Son of a bitch. So then we decided to do one more test, and really we were just curious to see if there would be any difference based upon the SD card that we were using with its write speed. So we're both using 16 gigabyte cards. One's a Transcend, one's a something else, I can't remember. But one's write speed was 10 on mine and 20 on his. So we wondered if that had anything to do with the video quality. So we actually switched SD cards between the cameras and wanted to see if that had any effect on the actual video produced by either side. So here we go. The exact same settings across the cameras, switching the SD cards, and the T3i pretty much holds true. Even writing to a slower card on that 10 megabit, it doesn't really look that different. It looks good. But actually the T4i running on the faster card at 20 looks worse than it did when it was at 10. Let me show you the difference there. So there are two differences between test 2 and test 4 on the T4i. Test 2, of course, has a 60 shutter speed compared to the 80 on test 4, but we've also switched the memory cards. And it looks like the 10 megabit card actually looks like a better picture as compared to the 20 megabit card. Again, I don't know. Okay, so here's what I learned through our silly little exercises. First, the T3i's auto settings seem to do a much better job of capturing the moment as it should in terms of maybe its shutter speed, but definitely with aperture and ISO as compared to the auto settings of the T4i. Just a lot smarter choices. So definitely if you're thinking about auto mode, at least with these two models of these two that we have here, the T3i seems to do a much better job. In relation to that, the ISO required by both cameras seems to be very different. The T3i can be in a normally lit situation inside a home and produce very fine video at 200 ISO, whereas the T4i chooses to use 1600 ISO. So it makes me think that the light sensibility between the T3i and the T4i is very different, whereas the T3i may have an advantage there. And then lastly, even when you exactly match up the settings between these two models, the T3i seems to produce a more crisp picture, more well-lit picture as well. So when you have the same lens on, when you have the same settings, when you have the same environment, the T3i is performing better than the T4i. And if I was the owner of the T3i, I'd probably feel pretty good about that, but I'm not. So if you have any ideas or comments around what could be causing these differences, please, love to read them, educate me, but right now I'm not too thrilled about being a T4i owner.